Now that we've gotten to play with panels and display suite, it's a good time to start comparing them a little bit and give you a sense of why you might choose one over the other in different contexts. First of all, in panels, one of the things that people really like about it, and one of the arguments for it being such a good model for content layout, is that it brings together a lot of different components into a single place for configuration. So in Display Suite, the configuration is split up between multiple pages. For example, we set up the view mode to lay out our fields in the way that we'd like, and then in order to position the block that contains some of those fields, we then have to go to the block's configuration page or to context in order to display it. Whereas in panels, we're going to do all of that in one place. In panels, we can also set up the structure of our fields, though we haven't done that yet, to do something kind of like a view mode, except it's not reusable. It's something a little more like what we're going to see with views, where we can display specific fields. So when you're thinking about a default for what you're going to choose for a particular project, this is probably a plus on the panel side. However, this could be discounted a bit because the way panels works, it has to create a whole novel interface for that configuration. So we have a set of concepts like variants and layouts to wrap our minds around in order to work within the context of a panel, whereas Display Suite leverages existing configuration pages. For example, when we lay out the fields in a view mode, we're using a page that's identical to our field display settings for a node. And then when we go to display a block, we're using the block's configuration page or context. So we're actually reusing concepts and configuration pages that we might be familiar with anyways. So another point we can compare panels and Display Suite on is where we can position content. Both in panels and Display Suite, we can create a custom layout for the content area of the page. However, in Display Suite, we can break out of this and actually position content outside of our content area into other regions of the theme using that region to block feature. In order to achieve the same effect with panels, we would have to use something called Panels Everywhere, which takes over the entire theme and makes it panelable. And there are some downsides to that we'll discuss later. Or we would need to centralize on panels and make sure we don't use any theme region that's going to vary from one page to another for any block display at all, and just centralize all of our block display within the panel's content area. Another point we can compare panels and Display Suite on are the layout options. Both in panels and Display Suite, we have a set of layouts that we can choose from for a default structure for our page. For example, we can choose a 3-column layout, or we can choose a 2-column layout with a header and a footer. In panels, we have the option to create a custom layout. You saw how we did that with the Builder layout option, but we can also create custom layouts through the user interface in another way that we didn't explore just yet. But I mention it just to point out that there are a couple of ways that we can create custom layouts, whereas in Display Suite, we're stuck with what's given to us. Even though that's the case, something we didn't cover here is that in the Display Suite layouts, any column that doesn't have any content in it will automatically collapse and get pulled into one of the other columns. In panels, that doesn't happen. So if we have a column that contains content in some instances but not in others, it won't automatically collapse. Display Suite is a little smarter in that respect, and it will collapse it. So the existing layouts that it gives us are a bit more flexible, but if we want something outside of what was given to us, we don't have many options to edit those. One quick thing to point out is that even if you do centralize on panels for the laying out of content, you may still end up using Display Suite in order to create custom view modes, so you can lay out fields in a way that you can reuse in multiple contexts.